Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, my survivor friends. Today we present a reasonably sized interview, 25 minutes, of an author and all-around interesting thinker, Fran Tabor. I interviewed Fran earlier in the summer, but this is the recording of this. So don't worry, we're getting close to the end of our summer vacation. Soon you and I, and countless others, will be walking hand in hand towards the blinding sunlight of Season 5. And I am working on the script for Season 5 as we speak. And by working on, I mean running out of time and worrying with intense apprehension at how we're going to extract ourselves from this story. We need to give our characters compelling finality to their arcs. We need to resolve a number of tensions. We need to answer several questions and do it all in an entertaining and fulfilling way, a world-class way. I'm not worried. I always get stuff done. I will power through, and I'm sure we will all be happy, satisfied. I enjoyed this conversation that you'll be hearing today, and this is the wonder of the world today, that I can have a conversation with someone thousands of miles away in Kalispell, Montana. Beautiful place. I think I've been through there. I could tell a story, but I'm not going to. And have this conversation and learn something, right? And be interesting. Get some new ideas. Understand a different perspective. And this is why I love doing these interviews. So I'll put Fran's links, all her books, all the other ephemera, in the show notes and in the post for this episode on my website at oldmanapocalypse.com. Fran Tabor believes fiction's ultimate purpose is to prepare us for moments we have not yet and may never live. Fran's books include romance, mystery, facts, and wild science fiction. The need for romance books is obvious. Love should be part of everyone's life. Likewise, real mysteries abound, and factual books, to stop learning is to stop living. Society's need for imaginative, multifaceted science fiction is less obvious. Our first contact with extraterrestrials will most likely be in a manner we cannot imagine. And therefore we need all the imagination stretchers possible. Unless there are no extraterrestrial aliens, then we should share the gift of life with the universe, which will demand great technical imagination. Nothing sparks imagination like old-fashioned, hardcore science fiction. When not writing, she runs a mom-and-pop type small-town business started in 1978. Its first years, it did less than $30,000, but by 1998, it did over $1 million a year, which it has done every year since. So enjoy this conversation. I'll be back briefly at the end to give you my updates. Hey, so Fran, how are you this afternoon?
I am absolutely wonderful.
What is that lake in your background?
That is the Flathead Lake, the largest natural freshwater lake in the western United States.
Okay.
And it's a remnant of Lake Missoula that has become famous to geologists in the last 50 years.
Okay, so this is up in Montana.
This is in northwestern Montana. Yep. And that is a ponderosa pine immediately behind
Yes,
me.
it is. And it looks like a willow tree coming out on the left there. But Yep, good stuff. All right. So give us the 200 words on who you are and what you do.
My primary day job is I am a small business owner in Kalispell, Montana. I got started in the business I'm in because it's a family business.
Okay.
My other job that I love to do is I am a compulsive writer. I can't stop writing. It's like a disease. I write fiction, nonfiction, books, articles, and advice, whether people want it or not. Advice that my life would have been better if I had followed my own advice, but instead it was interesting.
Sure.
I'm also a mother, a grandmother, and a dreamer.
You say that about the advice, right? I've been podcasting for a long time, and I used to write a lot of sort of self-helpy type articles, and people would go, "Oh, this is great. This is exactly what I needed today." But to me, it was always like, I'm not writing for you. I'm writing for me. I'm trying to tell myself to do this stuff, right? And figure it out on my own and sort out my own brain. So it's kind of funny that way. You really don't know who your audience is, and you just write for yourself and hope it helps somebody else.
That is true for both the nonfiction and the fiction, that I write the stories I wish I were reading. Exactly.
Yeah. And we were talking about interviewing earlier. That's always been my theory around that too, is right. You interview people you find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then, your audience will find it interesting too, because they'll feed off of your curiosity and interest, right?
Right.
So that's all that we got it all figured out. We don't need to do anything else. We got it all figured out. So tell me about your fiction. Like, you have some science fiction-y stuff, right?
I have science fiction. My non-science fiction has sold better, but my science fiction is a work of love because it is so much less. The real advantage to science fiction is that you can explore ideas and concepts, but without all the emotional baggage that comes with trigger words if you write about real life.
Right.
And those emotional trigger words too often stop people from thinking. They just go, well, this is the way this should be. But in science fiction, people are willing to let their brains open up more, look at the world in different ways, and say, well, what would happen if? And that is not only emotionally and intellectually freeing, but I think it allows the reader and the writer to both become better people than they would have been otherwise.
Right.
And most people don't think of science fiction as an aid of self-improvement. Like, your running is obviously an aid for self-improvement. But the extra brain stretching involved with science fiction is a whole additional ball game.
Yeah.
And I think the Arthur C. Clarkes of our past deserve every bit as much credit as the Hemingways. In fact, in my limited circle, I think they deserve more because they were more fun to read.
Yeah. So I think there's two different crafts we're talking about there, but I have the exact same response when people ask me that question about science fiction, right? It's a safe space for people to explore ideas. So you can kind of sneak it in, different ideas, because their barriers aren't up, right? Their defenses aren't up. They've already suspended belief or suspended disbelief, or however that is said. And so you get sort of a fresh slate to talk about things. And you can explore, you can try things that, maybe it's something you're thinking about that applies to today, but you can put that into, in my case, an apocalyptic setting, and it's kind of fun, right? You can learn something about humanity that way, learn something about yourself.
And when you have the dystopian world, it really forces you to ask questions about what is essential for the human spirit to survive, and what it even means to have a human spirit, as opposed to simply surviving.
Yeah.
A lot of science fiction has to do what it means to be the worth of a human. Like, one of my first sci-fi stories that was part of a radio broadcast or whatever, was entitled The Greatest Danger. And it turned out the greatest danger wasn't physical danger like the mother of the child was afraid it was. The greatest danger was that her child would never reach his full potential. And I think that is the greatest danger for each of us, is that we cannot reach our full potential. And it's not easy to get in an environment where you have to stretch your every ability and become all that you can. It's not just an army slogan. It's a slogan for people who bake cakes. It's a slogan for people who fix cars. But the opportunity to learn what you are fully capable of and to stretch yourself like that is something that is so valuable. And like all things of immense value, I think it's very rare.
So you're saying that science fiction, the act of creating it and or the act of consuming it allows you to find your edge, so to speak?
It helps you to awaken yourself to your edge. The other primary theme I have in my science fiction is the difficulty of communication and how assumptions are a danger to communication.
Yeah. It's existing frame of reference is how I would and going back to what you just said about going beyond what you think your capabilities are. The biggest step forward is when you realize that you're trapped in a frame of reference. And once you break that, then it's kind of scary, but it's also, what else is possible, right?
Very much so.
Yeah. Yep. And so you do a lot of first contact talking or writing. What's so fascinating to you about first contact?
Well, there are many people who firmly believe that humans have already had first contact with aliens. Maybe they're right.
Yeah, they live in Florida. I read it in the.
I firmly believe that there will come a time when we officially, unavoidably, have first contact with a non-human species.
Extraterrestrial?
Most likely extraterrestrial. But in my writing, I don't limit it to extraterrestrial because, after all, I'm a sci-fi writer.
Right.
There's a whole lot of animals on this planet. And some of those animals might even be trying to communicate with us.
Sure. They're saying so long and thanks for the fish.
Yeah, or might even not even think we're worth communicating with.
Yeah.
The real difference will be we as humans do not realize how much the physical world we live in defines who and what we are. It's very difficult from somebody that grows up and lives in the heart of Manhattan, say, developing a conversation with somebody who has always lived in the Amazon rainforest. But say that rainforest person is dropped in the middle of New York City, it'll be very difficult for him. But if he's determined and if he doesn't get killed in the process, he will eventually figure out some way of communicating what's most important. He'll be able to communicate the fact that he needs to eat, safe place to sleep. And we have no doubt that some type of communication would be developed no matter how different their background is. And it's because all humans receive sensory information the same way. We have roughly the same eyesight, roughly the same hearing range, roughly the same raw physical abilities. And all of our physical perceptions and abilities affect the languages we speak, affect the questions that we can ask. And one of the questions that I am continuously asking in all my writing is, what can we not ask because we don't have the physical perception to even be able to ask? How much do you have to know more, to ask the right question? And a very simple example of this is reading like the history out of astronomy. You're always going to find somebody that says, well, we're going to get a bigger telescope, but we're not going to see anything more than what we're seeing. And then we suddenly realize that some of these nebula aren't just clouds in our galaxy, they're separate galaxies. Well, this guy's developed a camera that sees it records in different wavelengths than what we can visibly see, but it's not going to really show us more. We end up seeing stars and phenomena we could not see before. That no matter what we do to expand our range of vision, we have, without exception, ended up seeing something that was not predicted. You're getting to the point you would think people would stop saying, well, we're not going to really see anything new. But the experts are still saying it, and they're still being proved wrong. Yeah. That's astronomy. The same is
true. Yeah, and that's true, because the way technology is developing right now, it's almost outstripping our ability to comprehend it, So
and we're seeing things within the cell and within the DNA that were not predicted.
Yep. And also within particle physics as well.
Absolutely.
They're learning stuff every day. And so it's really hard to, you get these sort of absolutes. People say, speed of light, or they say this, that, or the other thing. No, that was, I've seen in my lifetime those absolutes disappear, in quantum mechanics, in biology. So,
yes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the stuff we're doing now would appear as magic to somebody from the 1940s.
Yes. And do you remember when the first pictures came back from Pluto, all the experts were saying it is going to be a frozen history of what our universe or our solar system was like at the beginning. It's like an icebox out there and nothing is changing. The first pictures come back and it's obvious Pluto has a very active surface. Yeah. And there are colons on it that are reflected back in its neighboring or little moon. And both of them are obviously active. It is not a frozen snapshot of what the solar system was like at the beginning, predicted.
So this is another. So we could keep going down this list of why humans are bad at this stuff. But what I find is people, they're not really good at holding a whole bunch of different variable concepts in their brains at the same time. So they try to label. Mm-hmm. They'll label something, put it in a box, and forget about it, so that doesn't keep them awake at night. And that's what we do. We label stuff, but we never go back and look at in those boxes and say, is that still true? All right.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely. That's human nature. So again, my thought is we're going to have to evolve somehow to be able to keep up with the technology and the sensory technology that you're talking about. So going back to First Contact, what do the science fiction First Contact movie stories that you've read see? What do they get right and what do they get wrong? What do you like and what don't you like? What's your favorite?
My favorite is the Twilight Zone episode that ends with the phrase, "It's a cookbook."
Yeah.
You know that story?
Yeah, that was very popular on social media, right? Yeah. Yeah. It turns out they're dragging all the humans off of Earth. They're telling them they're taking them away to, I don't know, to take them to some alien university or something to live in Wonderland. It turns out they're taking them away to eat them. Yeah.
Well, remember, the best cattle are the ones that are most well taken care of.
Yeah.
It's heaven on earth for them until it isn't.
So who gets it wrong? And why do they get it wrong?
We all get it wrong because we are all limited to human motivations.
Yeah.
And even when we try to get away from that, very few science fiction writers think of enough human motivations. I don't think they read enough history, that it's too easy to think, well, people are just going for conquering or just going for getting rich. A lot of human exploring was done out of pure 100% curiosity, but the curiosity levers will come up with other excuses for the people to finance them.
Yeah.
But we don't really fully think of every single reason one human has moved away from other humans to another location. And then we should take all of those reasons and say, well, how many variations of this can exist? And then look to the animal world and say, why is it that even on a continent, some varieties of animals end up spreading across the whole continent and others never really get around their own little tiny corner? When if you were to transplant them, they would thrive just fine elsewhere, but it seems like they just have no desire to go beyond where they're at. And so do alien species have to be forced out of their solar systems by some imminent disaster? Or will they be going out because they're just curious? Is there something about other solar systems that they want? Are they just driven by a desire for immortality and just want to spread out for that reason? Are they driven by fear and they realize that no matter where you're at, the next level of danger is beyond that? Like we know that Earth has been bombarded by asteroids. We know that some of those asteroids come from beyond our solar system. So we need not only to watch for asteroids within our solar system, but we really should have some type of warning system beyond our solar system. And as we get the technology to see other levels of danger, we'll want to go beyond and take care of that next level. A really fear-driven society could end up conquering the whole galaxy just out of fear.
Yeah.
Another one, do it out of love.
Yeah. Preemptive expansion, right? Yeah.
Preemptive extension, or out of loneliness and wanting more life forms around and doing it out of love and wanting to share. Would we be able to tell which type we're dealing with? Would that make a difference with how we deal with them? And with humans, we can say the exact same words, same emphasis, and mean totally different things. This has led to family squabbles that have lasted for years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And eventually they get straightened out. They go, oh, that's not what I meant. And it's taken them 10 years to find out that they had misunderstood each other.
Yeah. Our communication is flawed at best.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if we are so flawed between each other, how flawed are we going to be with something else? And I don't think there's near enough first context of science fiction and not near enough variety in it, because our only hope will be the ideas that already exist before they have to exist.
Yeah. So go into it a little bit deeper, right? Then, because typically what you see is they're out to get us for some reason. Why you would travel across the galaxy to take over our little dirt ball, I don't know, but that's typically that's one. Those are the action movies, right? And I think this is probably my criticism of the current science fiction more than any other criticism, is they're all adventure stories. So it's not really about the science. It's not really about the fiction. It's about the next gunfight and the next chase scene over and over and over again. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And the hero's always a 20-year-old good-looking guy.
Yes. And so where are the grandparents on the hero's journey?
Exactly. Where are the old people?
I mean, even in Independence Day, the guy's father did not get enough respect for what he did. He should have gotten more.
Yeah. So what else are you working on? What else do you got in the hopper that you're thrilled or curious about?
I am finishing for the 10th time another science fiction book that involves 2 alien species, one homegrown here on Earth, and another that is in partnership with it, that is trying to develop communications with humans, because there's a third alien species that, for reasons of its own, has just been going through and systematically wiping out any interstellar or interplanetary civilization that it sees as a threat. We don't know why they feel like that, because they're not interested in talking with anybody. But we end up with a double species that we're trying to get communication with. And the other species deliberately is working at developing communication with humans, not because they think that we're physically capable of helping much, because they both have the ability to travel interplanetary and interstellar both, but because their scientists have analyzed that we live in such a different environment than what they do. We would have to be able to ask different questions than they can. And they're very much in hopes that we can ask the question that could enable them to fight off the people.
Yeah. So this is a common theme right across science fiction, hard science fiction, is there's something unique about humans, which is a unique value. And that kicks in just the right moment at the end of Act 2 for us to win the day.
And this one was partially inspired by another sci-fi story that was on the Twilight Zone. That is my second favorite. And it has an alien that shows up, lands in the United Nations, and announces that they were breeding the human race. It's not quite good enough because we have a problem with aggression. And then it leaves. And everybody gets excited and they finally achieve world peace. It was hard. And then it turns out that our problem with aggression is that we were not aggressive enough.
Yeah.
We were too pacifistic. And because we are too peace loving, we weren't good enough. And they wipe out our civilization and get started again and try to make a better, more aggressive, less peaceful human.
Yeah, I have not seen that one. I haven't seen them all though, so that'll be good. I love Rod Serling was such a great writer.
Extremely. And
although he didn't write all of them, he just wrote some of them.
He wrote every other one. Yeah. And the ones he wrote were always the much better. And I could never decide if he was that much better a writer or if he deliberately picked other writers that were good, but not as good.
But didn't he also have some of the other Golden Age greats like Harlan Ellison and people like that writing shows for him?
Yes, he did, but they weren't as good.
Yeah. He probably just, when he produced those, he made the screenplay a little bit rusty, so it wouldn't look as good as his, right?
That could be.
Could be. Ah! All right. What other movies have you seen lately that you liked?
Everybody who saw Avatar loved it. Of course, the world it described is my favorite childhood world. You're riding a dragon around, and then you're swimming on water dragons.
Yeah.
And I liked Avatar 2 because of the way it portrayed fatherhood. And not enough movies portray and glorify the role of father as protector. Too many of them downgrade that. And I think in too much modern writing, you men get a short shift.
Yeah, I would say the last 20 years, especially if you're watching network TV, if you're old enough like me to know what network TV is, all the husbands, all the fathers were buffoons for the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. They may be competent buffoons, but they're all weak buffoons. So I find that a little bit offensive.
I think you should find it a lot offensive.
Well, I don't get offended. That's part of my act. But you're right. And the same thing with the movies. It's almost like a recipe, right? Hollywood has a recipe. That's why it's so thrilling when you find something that's different. When you find a movie that's different, some little thing that was made and nobody has ever seen it before. And I guess that would be one of the saving graces of the streaming world, is you can find those little gems out there that you can watch, right?
Yes. Also, Hollywood, whether it intends to or not, it teaches people how to behave. Now, nobody wants to be preached to. Nobody wants to go to a movie that is pure preaching, but it does teach values. It does teach how to react. It does teach how to behave. And the older Hollywood movies, I don't know if they knew they had that responsibility or by mere accident. Back at the beginning, they were telling the stories they themselves wanted to see and wanted their children to see. But men and women were taught how to be brave.
Yeah.
And also what it means to be brave for a reason. And real bravery is not artificial. It is not for the benefit of others. It is because of a value system within and portray the deliberate acquisition of a value system. Not what you've been handed, but what you have thought about. And when push comes to shove, have to really think, is this my own true value?
Yeah, and I think as fiction writers, that's one of the themes that I really like to play with is, in a moment of truth, who is the real person, right?
Right.
Because in a moment of truth, that real person will come out, and who knows what it is, right? And that's part of the fun, is you get to build that character and see what they do in different situations.
Right.
All right, I'm gonna lead you to the exit here because my meeting's almost up. But it was a pleasure talking to you, Fran.
I had a blast talking with you, Mr. Russell.
Yeah. And we can tell people how they can find you online and what your links are and that sort of thing.
You can look up Fran Tabor, Tabor, and then I would recommend Plus To Own Two Worlds. That's my favorite book. It's a science fiction book. And it is actually it's available on Amazon and all the other online sites. It has had some very good reviews. Even Kirkus gave it a to get it review, which is hard to get for sci-fi.
Yep.
And so to look up, quote, to own two sons, and that's probably easier to remember than my name.
Yeah, and I'll get all your links and I'll put them in the show notes for you so people can find you, all right?
I would appreciate that greatly. Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Pleasure talking to you. You have a great week.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, survivors, thanks for sticking with us. Did you notice how I didn't talk much in this interview? And that's because I was thinking about what Fran was saying. And that's when you know it's interesting, when I'm not carrying the weight of the conversation, when I'm mulling over what has been said, what has been posited. So how's my summer going? It is, if you are time traveling, it is the middle of July, towards the end of July. And I'm still training hard for my 100K trail race on my birthday in November. And I am still slamming away at the Season 1 manuscript. And you may ask, what do they have in common? Well, there is a point towards the end of most long races where you hit the wall. Your body starts to fail, your mind starts to go into a tailspin, you want to give up, you want to quit, because the finish line seems unimaginably far away, and you feel like you'll never get there. And I've been there many times. And that's what the work on this manuscript feels like right now. But you know what? You know what the solution is? The solution is to forget about that finish line, to put aside that fatigue, to put aside the pain, and to focus on taking that next step with as much energy and acuity as you can muster. And then the next step, and then the next, until eventually you look up and the finish line is there. You can find everything you need at my website, oldmanapocalypse.com. I post all the links to everything I talk about here. Hey, we're now at 496 members. I mention that because it's pretty close to 500, which will be cool when we get to 500 in our Facebook group. All the links here are in the show notes to the website. You can buy me a coffee. You can subscribe on Acast. And you can also go to Patreon and give me some support. Maybe I am that alien intelligence that Fran warned you about, and this is our first contact. So if so, you better be nice to me and keep surviving.